in second normal form if it's in first normal form plus every column of data that is not a primary key of the table is dependent on the whole of the primary key. So what does this mean? So this is to do with removing unrelated data from tables. So remember from before I said we only wanted related data in a single table? Well, this is how we use normalization to remove unrelated data from a table. We want to make sure every column that is not a primary key of the table is dependent on the whole of the primary key. And by the whole of the primary key, we mean every column that makes up that primary key. So I've already mentioned that we can have multiple columns combined together to make a primary key, and any column that's not a primary key must depend on the whole of this primary key. So now let's look at an example. So here we have a student table, and it contains the student name, any subjects they're taking, the grades they got for that subject, and their age. So let's take a look and see if this table is in second normal form. So the first thing we need to check is whether it's in first normal form. So we can see there's no repeated rows of data. Every row is unique within this table. We can see that every column only has a single entry, and we can see that it does indeed have a primary key. So the primary key is the student column plus the subject column. So we have Natasha Williams Maths, Natasha Williams English, and this combination is unique. And then we have Daniel James Maths, Simon Brown Chemistry, Emma Thomas Geography. Okay, so it is in first normal form. So now we've got to check whether it is in second normal form. So is every column that's not a primary key dependent on the whole of the primary key? So we can see we have two columns here which aren't primary keys. We have grade and age. So let's first check the grade column. So yes, this is dependent on the whole of the primary key. And we know this because it doesn't make sense to just say Natasha Williams A. We need Natasha Williams plus the subject of maths to be able to say that her grade was A. And it also doesn't make sense to just say subject maths grade A or subject maths grade C. We also need the student name to be able to say what grade they got. So yes, the grade is dependent on the whole of the primary key. So it depends on the student and the subject. So now we need to check the age column. Well, the age column does depend on the student, so we need the student to be able to tell what their age is. So we need to say Natasha Williams to be able to say she's 15, and we need the student name Daniel James to be able to say he's 16. But we don't need the student subject. So the fact that Natasha Williams takes maths and English doesn't have any impact on her age at all. So this age column is dependent on the student, but it's not dependent on the subject. So this age column is not dependent on the whole of the primary key. So this table is in fact not in second normal form. So now the question is, how are we going to make sure that this data is normalized so that it follows the second normal form? And to do that, we actually need to split this table into two separate tables. So the first table is going to look like this. It has the student name, the student subject, and the grade. So basically we've removed the age column from the original table, and we just have the name, subject, and grade. So now we need to check whether this table is in second normal form. Well, first let's check if it's in first normal form. So yes, there's no repeated rows of data, every row is unique, and every column only has one value. And we also have a primary key. It's the same primary key, it's student plus subject. So now we need to check whether it's in second normal form. Well, actually we've already checked for the grade column. Yes, it's dependent on the whole of the primary key. So we need the student name, and we also need their subject to be able to tell what grade they got. So yes, this table now follows second normal form. So what about the age of the student? So for that we actually need a separate table which just has the student name and the age. So let's check if this follows second normal form. Well, does it follow first normal form? So yes, there's no repeated rows of data. We haven't got Natasha Williams entered twice or Daniel James entered twice. Every row is unique. Every column only has one value, and we have a primary key. It's our student column. So this is normal form. Now does it follow second normal form? So our primary key is now only made up of one column, and we have one column which is not a primary key, which is age. And yes, it's fairly obvious that this does depend on the student. So the age column does depend on the whole of the primary key. So this table is now in second normal form. So if we had any columns in a table which weren't dependent on the whole of the primary key, it's usual that we'd have to separate this data into two separate tables so that it follows second normal form. So second normal form is quite a lot more complicated than first normal form. So maybe you need to go through this video more than once just to make sure that you have absolutely understood what second normal form is, how to make sure